welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Wednesday, December 19th. India calls on China to follow maritime laws. A hearing in Congress on the persecution of Falun Gong. And new details come to light in this school stabbing. When the Chinese regime granted itself the power to stop and search any vessels in the South China Sea, many countries were alarmed. Ahead of a meeting between India and 10 Southeast Asian nations, India's foreign minister has said that China needs to respect international maritime laws and settle its conflicts peacefully through dialogue.
On Tuesday, India's foreign minister expressed concern over China's increasing dominance in the South China Sea. The Chinese regime has been in conflict with its southwest neighbors over resource rights in its southern waters. China claims almost all of the South China Sea and last month granted its southern Henan province the right to police its waters. India's foreign minister says this new mandate goes against international law.
There should be compliance and respect for the law of the sea. That freedom of navigation on high seas is something that we must all adhere to. But the sovereignty issues can be settled between China and the countries that they have a concern about, whether it's done bilaterally or it's done multilaterally.
He says the Chinese regime's idea of sovereignty and its means to protect it are not always in line with other countries. But he says,
I don't think that this is something that will reach levels of hostility or conflict.
On Thursday, India will hold a summit with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, to discuss this very issue. The meeting is expected to produce a consensus view on navigation freedom in the South China Sea and also India's cooperation with ASEAN countries. While India has expressed an interest in increasing trade with China, it also says it will protect its economic interests. Earlier this month, India's Navy chief said it would deploy forces if its oil operations in the South China Sea were threatened.
And it wasn't just China's maritime policies that's attracting international attention. At a congressional hearing in the US on Tuesday, Falun Gong practitioners and China experts reviewed the Chinese regime's 13-year persecution of the meditation practice. The hearing focused on allegations that Falun Gong prisoners were being killed for their organs.
On Tuesday, the US Congressional Executive Commission on China, or CECC, held a hearing on the human rights abuses against the Falun Gong practitioners in China. Falun Gong is a spiritual meditation practice that has been persecuted by the Chinese regime since 1999.
The campaign has been severe, brutal, ugly, and vicious.
Falun Gong practitioners have been illegally detained, sent to forced labor camps, and subjected to torture for their beliefs. But that may not be all.
Falun Gong practitioners are the most likely source of many of the organs used in the transplant procedures in China over the past decade.
The forced organ harvesting allegation first surfaced in 2006. This October, 106 members of the US Congress wrote a Dear Colleague letter to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. They want the State Department to release any information it may have on the state-sanctioned transplant abuse. Congressman Smith was one of the signees of the letter. He says the U.S. needs to take decisive actions to stop illegal organ harvesting.
We need to speak out boldly, effectively, with great clarity about what is truly going on, and then have a penalty phase. Those who do these things should be held to account, if not to go to prison, certainly not to be admissible to the United States by granting them a visa.
China must end all repression of Falun Gong practitioners, guarantee their freedom of belief and expression and assembly, and release all political prisoners.
3 U.S. doctors have launched a petition under President Obama's We the People initiative. The petition asks U.S. government to, quote, expose these crimes, stop them, and ensure the perpetrators are brought to justice. Once the petition reaches over 25,000 signatures by January 1st, the Obama administration will be obligated to respond.
It's been almost a week since a man slashed his way through a primary school in China's Henan province, wounding 22 children and 1 adult. Next, we hear from the families affected by the violence as new footage emerged of what happened last Friday.
As families begin to rebuild their lives after Friday's brutal school stabbings in Henan's Guangshan County, new details are coming to light.
The culprit was slashing madly, and the students were running everywhere, protecting their heads. I climbed upstairs to try to fight with him. He slashed me back.
The assailant, Min Yingjun, is in custody and has been charged with jeopardizing public security, according to state-run CCTV. A motive has also been given: fears about the rumored end of the world.
What I'm worried about most is that the attack will leave some psychological impact on my child.
His 7-year-old son, Xin Ye, is recuperating in a nearby hospital. He still wakes up at night crying. No one was killed during the attack, and most are in stable condition. 2 students are awaiting an operation at a larger hospital in Wuhan City. The 55-year-old woman, who was the first victim, is still in intensive care.
All suffered injuries to the head and face. Some of them have skull fractures and scalp lacerations. The elderly woman will be transferred to the general ward from ICU tomorrow.
State media has reported that 6 officials have been fired in the aftermath: 2 school principals, 2 township police officers, 1 township safety official, and 1 county education official. County officials confirmed, but no reason has been given. The Henan stabbings received little attention in Chinese media, which was absorbed by the school shooting in Connecticut. Netizens have criticized state media's suppression of the story. In the past 2 years, there have been at least 6 similar knife attacks in schools in China.
And coming up after the break, what a new report says was the likely trigger for the 2008 Sichuan earthquake. More and more wealthy Chinese are choosing to leave their country, and what this action movie actor is in trouble for with Hong Kong police. And welcome back. It's been more than 4 years after a magnitude 8 earthquake rocked China's southwestern Sichuan province. Chinese officials have always maintained it was nothing more than a natural disaster. Now, a Sichuan engineer has published a report suggesting the devastation might not have been an act of God.
The 2008 earthquake in Sichuan province claimed at least 80,000 lives. A research published this month now suggests the devastating seismic activity may have been caused by human factors. In this report, Canada-based Probe International says evidence indicate that the hydroelectric dam in the area probably triggered the earthquake. The report is not the first to link the dam to the tremors. Several dozen have already been published on the subject. The paper is authored by Fan Xiao. He is the chief engineer from the Sichuan Geology and Mineral Bureau. His paper suggests that massive loading and pressure from the Zipingpu Dam triggered the earthquake on May 12, 2008. Chinese authorities have denied previous claims that the hydro dam was linked to the earthquake. They argued the epicenter was too deep and not near the quake fault line. Fan Xiao says new research have proved those arguments wrong. His report suggests that the dam is located just 3.5 miles from the epicenter of the magnitude 8 earthquake. It was also around 5 miles deep, rather than around 9 as officials reported. The Chinese regime has pushed ahead with hydroelectricity in the country to fill its energy needs. The focus has been in southwest provinces, including Sichuan, with several major reservoirs either operating or being constructed. Fan Xiao says that the link between Zipingpu Dam and the 2008 Sichuan earthquake should serve as a warning to officials to reassess the current plans of dam construction.
China's economy relies heavily on lending for massive government-led projects, but with credit in the country being controlled by state-run banks, a shadow banking system has emerged. It's loosely regulated, and a US-based researcher says it could lead to a big problem.
Shadow banking could be fueling a subprime crisis in China, warns a senior researcher from the Bank of America Merrill Lynch Global Research. Shadow banking is a term used to describe the use of non-bank institutions that provide services similar to banks.
So now, the Chinese economy is becoming increasingly dependent on the local government, investment vehicles, as well as basically shadow banking, meaning that retail investors are buying into these structural investment vehicles to fund, risky, loans, in properties and in other sectors. So I think from that point of view, in many ways, these are China's potential subprime basically crisis in the making.
Wu was speaking during the Bank of America Merrill Lynch 2013 conference called Year Ahead in New York last Tuesday. China's credit market is heavily dominated by state banks. They often favor extending credit to large state-run companies. That means for many private companies, they have to look elsewhere for loans. This shadow banking system is loosely regulated at best.
The biggest downside risk for many people, including myself, is that something might happen with the shadow banking system. Clearly, the shadow banking system has been responsible for a big part of the credit growth in the financing over the last basically year in particular. And I think, we've gotten to a point now that I think, people are starting to worry about the vulnerability of the whole system.
During the conference, panelists from Bank of America Merrill Lynch predict the global economy will pick up next year. China would play a part in that, but not in the way it did previously.
One of the issues for China is that when China was first embarking on its big export boom, it was a small country and it could kind of lean very heavily on that. But now China's a big player in the global markets and it can't grow the way it did in terms of exports. So the country needs to develop more balance.
The panel also said rising inflation in 2013 would be a problem for the Chinese economy, as well as for other developing countries.
A new report released this week says many of China's richest are moving overseas, especially to the United States. The reasons, according to the reports, are higher quality of life, as well as better education opportunities for the kids. Here's more on what's making so many leave their homeland, going half a world away.
As China becomes richer, more of its most wealthy are thinking of leaving the country. That is, if they haven't done so already. On Monday, the Center for China and Globalization and Beijing Institute of Technology School of Law published its annual report on Chinese international migration 2012. The report found that more than 1 out of 4 Chinese people worth over 100 million RMB, or $16 million, have emigrated. Another 47% of them are considering emigrating. Among the people worth over 10 million RMB, nearly 60% have emigrated or have decided to emigrate. In 2012, the number of Beijing officials at and above the division level who are fleeing China with their money hit a record high. So why are China's wealthy leaving their country? China is getting worse in terms of rule of law. If the regime intends to punish you, you'll become a lawbreaker. If it doesn't, you can be treated as high as its guest. There's no guarantee on citizen identity, on human rights, and on property. So as long as there is a chance, the Chinese will choose to emigrate. In fact, some competent people have well paved the ways long ago, just waiting for the opportunity. The report says that in 2011 alone, more than 50% of Chinese immigration applications were filed for the U.S. Over 150,000 Chinese have obtained permanent residency abroad. Aside from looking to protect themselves, over 80% are emigrating so their children can get a better education. Other reasons include the pursuit of a higher quality of life, the right to give birth to more than one child, and lower tax rates. And as the wealthy leave, so does their money. While each Chinese citizen can legally transfer $50,000 out of the country each year, the Wall Street Journal recently estimated that more than $225 billion left China in the 12 months before this September. Observers have warned that in the long term, China's rural population and employment could be hurt by the amount of investment money moving out of the country.
It has not been a good week for Kung Fu movie star Jackie Chan. He's not only come under criticism in Hong Kong for his views on the right to protest, other details he recently told a mainland magazine has now caught the attention of Hong Kong police. Here's more.
Jackie Chan continues to make it into the spotlight, but not for his movies. In an interview last week, the star infuriated Hong Kong residents by saying protests there should be restricted. But now new details are emerging from the interview that started a police investigation.
Chan claimed in the past that triads, a Chinese-style mafia, harassed many Hong Kong actors. Only he was brave enough to stand up to them. But it wasn't with martial arts. Chan says he owns many guns and grenades that he's used to combat his foes. The problem is, that's not entirely legal.
He doesn't know much about the law of Hong Kong. He thought he was a hero and great, so he could talk nonsense and make irresponsible remarks.
Hong Kong authorities are now investigating whether he has the necessary licenses to carry guns, as well as some of his more outrageous stories. Like the one where 20 men armed with knives assaulted him at a restaurant. Chan said he used 2 guns and 6 grenades to get out of that situation, while failing to mention how the incident happened or ended.
And that's all for this broadcast of NTD China News. For more on China-related topics, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our new YouTube channel, NTD on China, where you'll find all of NTD's China content. Coming up next is a segment of the 9 commentaries of the Communist Party. Stay tuned.